He wore the uniform of honor, the same one he had fought for with pride. On this day, it wasn't about war or sacrifice, it was about his son's graduation, a moment every father dreams of. But instead of applause, two guards walked toward him, their words sharp and their actions cold. A decorated Marine told he didn't belong. Humiliation filled the room, silence cut deeper than any wound. Yet what no one expected was who would stand up next, and how the entire hall would never forget what followed. Marcus Taylor had lived a life defined by discipline, sacrifice, and loyalty. As a decorated Marine, his name carried stories of service, deployments, and long nights away from his family. But in his heart, none of those medals or stripes compared to the pride he felt in his son. To Marcus, his greatest mission was being a father. Graduation day was supposed to be the culmination of that mission. His son had worked tirelessly, pushing through sleepless nights of study, and now he stood ready to walk across the stage, a symbol of perseverance, of dreams realized. For Marcus, this day wasn't about uniforms or battles. It was about watching his boy step into the future. The auditorium buzzed with excitement. Families filled the rows, cameras in hand, smiles stretched wide. Marcus walked in quietly, dressed in the same marine blues he had worn countless times with honor. Heads turned, not out of fear, but out of admiration. To many, he was a man who embodied respect, sacrifice, and the kind of dignity only years of service could build. He found his seat, adjusting his posture the way he always did, straight back, eyes steady, shoulders squared. His wife squeezed his hand gently, her smile reflecting the pride they both carried. To them, this was more than a ceremony. It was proof that despite every obstacle, their family had risen. But beneath the applause, there was always an undercurrent. Marcus knew it well, the subtle looks, the second guesses, the quiet tension that often followed him in places where he was not expected to belong. It was the same silence he'd carried into restaurants, into meetings, into neighborhoods where his skin spoke louder than his service. Today, though, he pushed those thoughts aside. Today was for his son. The program began, the principal's voice echoing through the speakers, names being read one after another. Marcus's chest swelled with anticipation. Yet, even in that joy, something felt off. Near the back of the hall, two guards stood with arms folded, their eyes not on the crowd but on him. At first, Marcus ignored it. He had been watched before. But their stares didn't waver, and their murmurs seemed to spread like shadows along the edge of the room. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this day that was meant to be about love, pride, and family, was about to take a turn he never could have imagined. The ceremony pressed on, names echoing across the stage, but Marcus could feel the weight of those stares drilling into him. The guards shifted closer, their footsteps deliberate, their eyes never leaving his seat. His wife squeezed his arm, sensing the change, but Marcus forced a calm smile. He was no stranger to scrutiny. Still, there was something different here, something heavier. Finally, the inevitable came. One guard leaned down, his tone low but sharp. "Sir, you need to step outside." Marcus blinked, confusion flashing across his face. "Why?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. The guard's jaw tightened. "Orders, you don't belong in this section." Whispers rippled through the rows nearby. Families glanced over, some wide-eyed, others averting their gaze. Marcus remained seated, his chest rising with slow, controlled breaths. His son was minutes away from walking that stage. How could he leave now? "I'm here for my son," Marcus said, his voice firmer. "I have every right to sit here." But the second guard moved closer, looming over him. "You can explain outside." The words weren't just commands, they were accusations, dripping with the assumption that he was out of place. That his presence, his uniform, his very skin was unwelcome in a room meant for celebration. The humiliation hit harder than any battlefield wound. A decorated Marine, asked to leave his child's proudest moment as though he were a trespasser. His wife's hand trembled against his arm, her eyes pleading with him not to make it worse. Marcus stood slowly, towering over the guards yet choosing restraint. Years of discipline kept his temper in check, but inside, rage simmered. He had faced enemies abroad, risked his life for the flag stitched across his chest, only to return home and be treated like a criminal at his own son's graduation. The auditorium grew quieter, the murmurs swelling into uneasy silence. Students waiting backstage peeked around the curtain. Parents craned their necks. Everyone could see the scene unfolding, and still, no one spoke up. Marcus felt the walls closing in. Each step toward the exit felt like another piece of dignity being stripped away. His son's name would be called any moment, yet he was being escorted out like an intruder. As he neared the double doors, his heart pounded with fury and despair. He thought of his boy, standing in line backstage, unaware that his father might not be there to cheer. He thought of the countless times he had warned his son about the realities of this world, that no matter what uniform you wore, some would only see the color of your skin. The guard's grip tightened at his arms, pressing him forward. Gasps scattered across the room as the crowd sensed the injustice for what it was. Marcus lifted his chin, refusing to let shame bow his head, but inside he ached. And then, just as the doors loomed ahead, just as the moment seemed sealed, a sound cut through the tension. A voice, steady, commanding, "Let him go." The words didn't come from the principal or a fellow parent. They came from a group rising from the back row, 6 men, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, their posture unmistakable. Navy SEALs. The room fell still. Every eye turned toward them as they stepped forward in unison, their presence undeniable and their authority unquestionable. The guards froze, caught between orders and the weight of something far greater. And in that breathless silence, Marcus realized this wasn't over. Not yet. The 6 SEALs stepped forward in perfect unison, their presence commanding without a single word. Their uniforms weren't needed. The discipline in their movements spoke for them. The guard's grip on Marcus loosened slightly, hesitation flashing in their eyes. No one had expected this moment, least of all Marcus. The leader of the group, tall and sharp-eyed, repeated his words, "Let him go." His voice wasn't raised, but it carried through the auditorium like a thunderclap. The entire room held its breath. Parents sat frozen. Students waiting backstage whispered nervously. And Marcus, standing there with the guard's hands still pressing against him, felt a surge of conflicting emotions: humiliation, rage, disbelief, and now a glimmer of hope. But the guards didn't move. One of them squared his shoulders, forcing a veneer of authority. "Sir, this is a private event." He was told to step outside. The SEAL leader's eyes narrowed, a cold fire burning behind them. "That man," he said, pointing directly at Marcus, "is a United States Marine. He's earned the right to be here more than either of you." The words sliced through the air, gasps echoed from the crowd. For the first time, the guards faltered. But still, they held their ground, one hand twitching near his belt as if ready to escalate further. Marcus's chest tightened. He had faced enemy fire, he had walked through war zones where every shadow could hide danger, but nothing compared to this, being treated like a threat in his own country, in front of his community on his son's biggest day. The SEALs moved closer, forming a wall between Marcus and the guards. Their synchronized steps weren't aggressive, but they were undeniable. The balance of power in the room shifted. The guards, once so confident, now looked small against the weight of 6 men who had stared down death and returned. The principal, who had been silent until now, hurried forward, his voice trembling. "Please, let's not disrupt the ceremony." But the SEAL leader cut him off with a single look, one that carried years of loyalty, sacrifice, and unspoken authority. He turned back to Marcus. "You're staying right here. Your son's walking that stage, and you're going to be here to see it." The crowd erupted, not with cheers but with a heavy, tense murmur. Some nodded in quiet agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to take sides. But Marcus could feel it, the tide was turning. And then it happened. The announcer's voice rang out, "Next graduate, David Carter." Marcus's heart lurched. His son stepped onto the stage, his eyes scanning the crowd nervously. For a moment, it looked like he thought his father was gone. But then he saw him standing tall, flanked by 6 SEALs who had placed themselves between him and the men who tried to remove him. David's shoulders straightened, pride radiating across his face. He wasn't just walking for himself anymore. He was walking for his father, for his family, for every unspoken story of injustice that had been swallowed in silence. The room seemed to freeze. Parents lifted their phones, not to record the ceremony, but the confrontation that had unfolded. This wasn't just a graduation anymore, it had become a battlefield of dignity and truth. Marcus's throat tightened. For a split second, he felt the crushing weight of every time he had been told he didn't belong. Every glance that questioned his worth, every door closed simply because of his skin. And yet here he stood, rooted, unbroken, shielded by brothers in arms who refused to let the injustice win. As David shook the principal's hand and clutched his diploma, a round of applause thundered through the auditorium. But it wasn't just for the diploma. It was for the defiance, the resilience, the refusal to bow down. Marcus's eyes burned, but he didn't blink. He couldn't. This moment wasn't just about pride, it was survival, vindication, a declaration that he would not be erased. The guards finally stepped back, defeated not by force, but by the undeniable truth standing in front of them. The SEALs didn't celebrate, didn't gloat, they simply stood watch, silent guardians ensuring justice held its place if only for a moment. But even in that moment of triumph, Marcus knew the battle wasn't over. The humiliation had already been etched into memory. The questions would linger. His son would never forget that his father had nearly been dragged out of the room, stripped of dignity on the day meant to honor him. And Marcus himself would carry it too, the sting of knowing that no matter his medals, his service, his sacrifices, some would always see only the color of his skin. The crowd's applause softened into silence, a silence filled with unease, reflection, and unspoken truth. And then David lifted his diploma high, his voice breaking the quiet. "This is for my dad." The auditorium shook with thunderous cheers, this time raw, emotional, and unstoppable. Marcus felt his knees weaken, his heart pounding against his chest. In that moment, pride and pain collided. He had survived combat zones, but here on American soil, in a room full of neighbors and strangers, he had fought one of the hardest battles of his life. And as the cheers echoed, he asked himself one haunting question. If it took 6 Navy SEALs to protect a Marine at his own son's graduation, what chance did countless others have when no one was watching? Marcus stayed in his seat until the last name was called, until the applause faded, until his son returned with diploma in hand. The SEALs quietly stepped back, blending into the crowd as though their presence had never been the center of the room. But Marcus knew it wasn't something anyone there could forget. He hugged his son with trembling arms, pride washing over him, but the sting of the humiliation lingered. He had been defended, yes, but only because extraordinary men had stepped in. And that was the part that weighed on him the heaviest. Without them, what would have happened? Would he have been forced out, erased from his son's memory of this day? That question haunted him. Because Marcus understood this wasn't just about him. It was about every black father who wanted to stand proud for their children. Every veteran who had risked his life for a country that still doubted his place. Every moment of dignity stolen in silence. The crowd went home, the stage was cleared, but the truth of that moment remained like a scar, visible to those willing to look. And so, his son's graduation became more than a milestone. It became a reminder of a fight still far from over. Because if a Marine, in full view of hundreds, nearly lost his place at his own son's graduation, how many others are pushed out in silence, unseen? This is not just Marcus's story, it's a reflection of America's unfinished promise. The question we all must ask is simple: how many more moments like this before dignity is no longer up for debate? Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, don't let it end here. Share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and let your voice be part of the conversation. Stories like Marcus's are not just tales from the past, they are reminders of what still needs to change. Together, we can make sure no one is silenced, no one is erased, and no one has to fight alone for dignity. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us as we continue sharing stories that matter.